When you ask somebody, what is the most important thing that ever happened to you in your life? They say, my parents died, I got married, I had a child, or I took a psychedelic. And the fact that a little bit of this type of medicine can be so life-transforming is kind of incredible. Caffeine's a drug, and alcohol is a drug, and all of these are drugs. So it's not that we're anti-drug, it's which drugs, and how do we use them? I don't believe psychedelics are cures for anything. It's not just a biochemical reaction. They are catalysts. They're catalysts for awakening, for awareness, but then the work, the hard work, is following the psychedelic. Okay, I had this insight. Now what do I do with it?
This has been exactly the conversation I was hoping for. Hey there, Jeff Lerner. Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. Always so thrilled to be back with you, having amazing conversations with amazing human beings. Today, we are joined by Matt Zemon. He is a psychedelic medicine advocate, best-selling author. Long story short. I don't know what quick story short is. In 2019, Matt had an opportunity to experience a guided psilocybin, which is a fancy name for magic mushrooms, journey. Completely changed his worldview. He went from there from someone who had never taken any drugs previously, other than maybe the occasional, marijuana inhalation, to a real deep dive: psilocybin, ayahuasca, ketamine, LSD, MDMA, DMT, and other chemical monikers that I can't even pronounce, and ultimately culminated in the publication of Psychedelics for Everyone, which I want to make sure I say that right. The subtext is a beginner's guide to these powerful medicines for anxiety, depression, addiction, PTSD, and expanding consciousness. It became a bestseller in 19 different categories. And Matt, I am excited to have this conversation. Welcome to Unlock Your Potential.
Jeff, I'm excited to be here.
So yeah, I guess there's so many places to start. And I mean, this is, I'm curious. I've seen, I know like Michael Pollan's stuff with the doc. I know there's a documentary about it. Like, my question is really like, how big an issue is this in the world right now? And I'm asking because I think I have a biased lens because I do so much work in like human potential and trauma release. So I actually it's super top of mind for me, but where do you think this is at in the world conversation right now?
I think it's super top of mind. I think we have over 300 academic institutions studying psychedelics. We're coming out of a 50-year prohibition against these types of molecules. And I don't know, I mean, when you ask somebody, what is the most important thing that ever happened to you in your life? They say, my parents died, I got married, I had a child, or I took a psychedelic. And the fact that a little bit of this type of medicine can be so life-transforming is kind of incredible. And then I love that there's research and there's the medical model, and I love that there's a religious freedom model and a decriminalization model, and all of these things are happening simultaneously right now. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, I have a number of, like I said, experienced this conversation from a number of different channels that support what you're saying, that like this is something that is really a buzz right now. And clearly that's why someone invited you to come on this show. Like, people are talking about this. It's wonderful to have you here to have this conversation. I'm like so excited this conversation is happening in the world right now. In general, I feel like there's an enlightening happening in the world that is maybe a few thousand years overdue, or at least a couple centuries here in this country. Okay. So, but first, if you would take us back 2019, who were you? Who are you, but who were you? And what was life like prior to this experience? Like, what brought you to that point? And I mean, I feel like there's a whole story here to set this up.
Jeff, I think I was a lot like the people who listen to this show. I was an entrepreneur. I had built a bunch of businesses. I was running a business. And some friends approached me and said they hired this guy to do a guided magic mushroom journey. Do I want to come? I was like, nah, I don't think so. I like things the way I like things. I don't think I need it. And they said, no, you want to do this. You have it. You'd love to learn. This is a chance to really learn about yourself. You love to travel. This is like a big trip in your head. Come do this. And in that first 6 hours, it completely changed the way I look and view the world. I realized how scared I was of dying. I realized that I reconnected with my mom. She died when I was 22. She was 49, and I reconnected her in that very first journey. I had insight into insight after insight over I'm not feeling safe and loved in my everyday life, because I could feel safe and loved in that journey. And I knew I wanted more of that, and I knew I wanted to understand more. And I ended up getting someone else to run my business, went back to school to get this master's in psychology and neuroscience and really understand the science behind some of this. And then, probably as importantly, more importantly, I went and tried a whole bunch of different psychedelics from a bunch of different sources and came up with some additional opinions that I'm happy to share.
Okay, so full disclosure, I'm not gonna say I'm you, but like I connect with that 2019 version of Matt because the only two, well, I'll give you my psychedelic backstory, and then like we can use this as a starting point, let's say, for the combo. So like I've smoked some cannabis at times in my life. I did LSD, what I thought was 2 times, although I'm pretty convinced it was only 1 time, and the other time it was just gummy candy with nothing in it that somebody overcharged me for when I was a teenager. And then as an adult, I have had experiences with psilocybin. So that's where I'm at. And like, to be honest, I've sort of, teenage LSD experience notwithstanding, I've sort of said, okay, cannabis and psilocybin, like I'm totally down with these because they are like, I sort of believe, without pretending to deeply understand that at some level, the fact that they are of this earth, created by nature, created by whatever created nature, as am I, a natural being, there's probably some alignment there. And I've heard various theories on why it is that these substances are so positive for us. But then you get into like all the stuff that sounds more like chemistry. And then I picture guys tinkering in labs, making cocktails to hijack humanity and turn us all into robots or whatever. And it's like, okay, so that was just to set up my level of knowledge and also my much greater level of ignorance, right? So yeah, I mean, why don't, if you would take me from that place into these other substances and I mean, maybe like whatever you have to share about them. Have you cataloged them? Have you analyzed the differences between them? Like, how does the person listening to this sort of practically take this information and go, okay, cool. What's in this for me and where do I start given what's now a cornucopia of options?
So Jeff, let me ask you one more question first, though. When you say you've had some psilocybin experiences or mushroom experiences here as an adult, were they large dose? Were they microdose? What kind of psilocybin experiences are we talking about?
I've tried both. So
Okay.
I've tried like the little, a dab a day does you well,
Microdose.
and then I've macrodosed, to go into those. You sort of block off. I mean, it's going to be 6 hours. Like, don't have a dentist appointment for that afternoon or whatever, right? And so I've tried both.
Okay, perfect. And I think where I'd love to take this is the why. Like, why did you do a 6-hour journey? I mean, you have so much going on. You have your school, you have your podcast, you have your speaking things. You chose to take 6, 7, 8 hours out of your life and do this magic mushroom natural journey. What were you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, again, kind of like yourself, it had been presented to me by people that I respected. Trust. And I knew, wouldn't do anything to contravene my best interests, not intentionally anyways, as this opportunity to learn a lot about oneself, deepen one's spirituality, see the world a different way. The term sacred geometry was mentioned, where you can start to see the sort of the structural complexities and beauty of the world. Like, just kind of hey, if you want to not dip your toe in, but basically if you want to partake of the world of psychedelics, this is a sort of one of the the lower hanging pieces of fruit you can start with is these magic mushrooms. And I've gone no deeper than that.
I think that's totally a fair place, assessment. That's it's
Mm-hmm.
a there are other harder psychedelics to try, but mushrooms are an easy starting point.
And let me
Relatively.
say this. I mean, in my world of like entrepreneurial and like the convergence of high performance entrepreneurs with like thought leader influencers, this is like everybody, this is like a big, all the rage right now, you know? And so I had some environmental support of like, not like peer pressure, but more like for people like you, this is a reasonably well documented and discussed prescriptive opportunity for growth and development.
Without a doubt, and it's been used for thousands of years. I mean, there's cave paintings somewhere between 4,000 and 9,000 years old of mushroom shaman in Africa. There are shaman mushrooms grow in every continent except Antarctica. There is there's shaman up in Siberia. There were witches burned all throughout Europe for psychedelic practices, and certainly we have a long history in North America, Central America, and South America of these types of practices. So typically, communities don't keep doing things that hurt people. And we have a long history of this nature being used. I mean, the Greeks, one more thing, used a psychedelic ceremony for over 2,000 years. And people like Aristotle and Plato and Marcus Aurelius, a lot of the philosophers of that generation all went through that experience. And again, from a harm perspective, cultures don't do that for that long if it's particularly dangerous.
Is that the Eleusis?
I think it is the Eleusinian Mysteries. Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole theory that maybe that mystery was taken and brought into early Christianity. So super interesting. But let's stick here. So how do these things work? Let's stick with mushrooms, brushstrokes. What happens? Why can we take a few grams, 4 or 5 grams of mushrooms and have this type of experience? What happens in our brain when we do this? So we know that it quiets down what's called our default mode network. So it's that inner narrator. It's the narrator. It's like, you've got to work harder. You have to do more. You're not enough. You're not worthy. That voice in our head that's constantly talking to us, it quiets that down. And for many of us, we're not used to that. We're not used to, that's what happens when that's quiet. It then starts to fire neurons that might not have fired together since we were a kid. There's a beautiful brain imaging that shows kind of a normal brain and then one on psilocybin. It's just all lit up. And that means we're now making connections that haven't been made in a long time. And what happens as we get older, we get into repetitive thinking patterns. And those repetitive thinking patterns end up materializing or manifesting in behaviors. This is how I think. This is how I act. And we take a psilocybin experience, and all of a sudden, those rules no longer apply. It's not how you think. I can think this way. I can think that way. And that's incredibly freeing. And I think for thought leadership, as we think about past events, so it's very liberating. They then remove kind of the notions of shame, blame, and guilt. And that's super important as we look back at things that have happened to us and that we have done. And we can look at our role in those activities with a new lens. And that can be incredibly healing. It opens up a state of neuroplasticity. So if we're trying to do a behavioral change, I want to reduce my drinking, I want to stop smoking, I want to exercise more. Your brain is in a place to receive those messages and to start making those habits happen. And then finally, for many people, there's some type of spiritual connection. Whatever your higher power is, you can feel it. Not be told it, you can feel it. And you can feel connected to each other. We can feel like, we all are brothers and sisters. I literally understand what that means. And you actually talked earlier about being part of nature. Yeah, that I am not separate and apart from the trees and the earth. I am part of nature, and I'm just a continuation of it. You bring all of that together for 6-7 hours, and it can be incredibly life-changing for people.
Yeah, I would align with everything you just said based on personal experience, and obviously based on, talking to a number of other people who've frankly delved much further into this world than me. So can you maybe take us through like your sequencing of like, okay, you went from psilocybin to what? Was there any rhyme or reason to what next? And ultimately sort of where has it led you I don't want to say as a conclusion, that might be overly reductive, but as a maybe a new perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I went from, again, really no drugs to psilocybin. I believe I did a few psilocybins, and then I went to ayahuasca. And ayahuasca, for those who aren't familiar, it's more physical. You typically purge or throw up during that process. You also typically take it 3 nights in a row or 3 nights out of 5. I did 3 nights in a row, and I'd never done anything like that before. And again, I was like, wow, this isn't. And then also it's delivered it can be multiple ways, but I did it through a Colombian taita and had just a very different experience than the times I'd experienced psilocybin. And I thought this is incredibly profound, beautiful medicine. I remember on ayahuasca when I kept lining up kind of what am I going to do next in life and what are my values and my purpose. And when I could get them all kind of aligned, like these alien people would cheers, like, yes, that's what you should do. Or I could look around and I could see people. And I knew that if I asked them for help, they would help me because they knew. And it was just kind of like, okay, I'm not alone in this world. There are people who are going to help me. The world is beautiful. And I just need to act in accordance with my values and my principles, and things are going to be okay. So from ayahuasca, I went to, I got curious about the medical model, and I got curious about ketamine. And I wanted to understand, okay, well, here's a molecule that takes 40 minutes to an hour. What's this like? And I went and experienced that delivered from 2 different doctors and tried a shot version, a sublingual version. And I thought, okay, this is beautiful medicine. I can see why people find this healing and why this is a powerful journey. For me, it wasn't as powerful as psilocybin or ayahuasca, but for many people, it's not an option. Ketamine is their option. So beautiful.
And ketamine is more sort of indicated specifically toward depression, right?
Ketamine is legal in all 50 states. It's prescribed off-label, primarily for depression and anxiety, but it can be used for OCD. It can be used for eating disorders. It can be used for substance use challenges. It could be used for suicidal ideation. There's lots of uses for ketamine. It's one of the few medicines we have that if someone is actively suicidal, they can give them a shot of ketamine and it can kind of knock the suicidal ideation off of them, which is really powerful. And for people who want to be met in a medical model, for people who say, I want a diagnosis, I want to talk to a doctor, I want to have a prescription from a pharmacy, it's a great solution. It's the only solution that you can get that way now. MDMA and psilocybin should be coming shortly, but ketamine is the only one legal across the states.
Okay. And yeah, keep us going.
Talk about MDMA. I mean, MDMA has just finished their phase 3 clinical trial, so it's well on the way of drug development. The FDA gave it breakthrough therapy designation. This is an entactogen, a heart opener type of psychedelic. When you take an MDMA or MDA, otherwise known as sassafras, they're very similar molecules. You feel a lot of love for yourself. You feel a lot of love for others. It also removes that shame, blame, and guilt. So it's really powerful in therapy. It was used for couples therapy for years. When a couple takes this, you can look at the other person and say, oh, I love you. And when you do this, it makes me feel this. And instead of our normal defensive reaction, you can just absorb it and say, oh, I didn't know. I didn't understand. I don't want to hurt you. I do want to love you, and I won't do that anymore. It's really powerful in therapy. The phase 3 clinical trials are finished, and the results are incredible. They took people with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder. So think about veterans, first responders, victims of sexual assault, where nothing has worked. They've tried all the medications and all the talk therapies. Nothing's worked. So this is a really challenging group to work with. They gave them 3 sessions of MDMA and some talk therapy before and after, and 67% no longer qualified as having PTSD. 88% had a clinically significant improvement in symptoms. I mean, the results are staggering. So we fully expect that MDMA will be re-legalized here in America at the beginning of next year. And that's just incredible. Feels really good to see that happening. I know we've talked about psilocybin already, but just the research on psilocybin for things like depression, anxiety, eating disorders is also tremendous. Johns Hopkins is working with terminal patients who have depression because it's end of life. They've got a terminal prognosis, and giving them psilocybin doesn't change the fact that they're going to die, but it changes the way they're going to live this last chapter and interact with their family and the type of experience they're going to have. And again, the results are tremendous. The FDA gave that breakthrough therapy designation, and certainly in a couple of years, we should have psilocybin re-legalized across the states. And then we're seeing states like Colorado and Oregon legalizing, creating a medical framework and decriminalizing it for other purposes. And California might do the same thing here. It's on the governor's desk right now, so we will see. Those all led to DMT and 5-MeO DMT, and or otherwise known as bufo. It's the natural is the venom from the Bufo alvarius toad, and then there's a synthetic version of that, and that is our only non-duality medicine. So this is the one where Michael Pollan talked about as a rocket ship in his book. You take this, you inhale it, and count to about 10, and you're in another universe for 10 to 20 minutes. Unlike other psychedelics, where there's still kind of a subject and an object, you're still kind of thinking your way through it. There's still a you in there. Mm-hmm. In this medicine, you're gone. There's no you, there's no place, there's no time, there's just the universe. And it's not visual. It's somatic. You just feel it. You feel incredibly safe. You feel incredibly loved. You feel connected. And yet you also know that you're not you. You're something else. And I found that medicine to just be incredibly beautiful. Trying to think here. Of course, there's LSD along the way. Yeah, there's a bunch of different medicines in this process.
Yeah, actually, can you speak about LSD? I actually had the list from prep for the show, and LSD is the only one you haven't specifically touched on. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, LSD in some ways is very similar to psilocybin, but it's a little bit longer. And for lack of a better word, I find it more metallic or more technical. There just is a different feel to it. With psilocybin, I feel so grounded on the earth. And with LSD, I feel a little bit charged up, but it's still 6 to 8, maybe a little bit more hours of visuals. I had this beautiful experience with LSD where my son had actually come to a psychedelic retreat. He didn't want to do any psychedelics, but he wanted to see what I was up to and to support. And at one moment, I kind of woke up in my journey, and he was standing in front of me, and I was just able to give him this big hug, and I could feel like my DNA and his DNA just connecting and pulsing through our hearts that were connected. And I had this moment where I was able to tell him, I was like, nobody gives you a manual for being a parent. My parents both died when I was young, and I just want you to know I'm doing the best that I know how to do, and I love you so very much, and that I'm proud of you, and I don't care what you do. I care who you are. And you have to know that that's it. I love you so much. And then we held each other for a little bit longer, and then he went on to go help other people on his journey, and I went on mine. But I think LSD is a beautiful medicine. A lot of people love microdosing LSD. It's another one of the big microdosing options. But I think on large dose, it's beautiful, just different. And I guess people get wrapped around like, which psychedelic should I do? And I tell them, I was like, what are you called to do? What do you have access to? What do you feel is right for you? They can all take you on incredible places, especially with a well-versed facilitator. What do you feel drawn to? But I wouldn't tell anybody, oh, you should definitely do psilocybin before you do LSD, or vice versa. It's go with what you think, and you'll be fine.
So I just want to, frankly, I guess I try to come into these conversations without a dog in the fight, or, non-biased, but on this one, I'll own, I think it's ridiculous for the government. I mean, I think there's some just massive hypocrisy at the legislative level that this stuff you can't do, but you can go drink 47 beers and your car will still start. I mean, there's some stuff out there, but I'm curious. So first of all, this is great on the FDA. This feels like progress that they're.
Yeah, it is progress.
Yeah. I mean, I'm used to watching documentaries about, the OxyContin fiasco and boo on the FDA, but this is pretty cool. You've done so much research in this space. Like what do you feel like is shifted?
I think actually Michael Pollan's book was that big of a eye opener for society. I think I think that happened. I think there hasn't been a shift in mental health in this country since the creation of the antidepressant over 50 years ago. And we know antidepressants work on maybe 40% of the population. And we know that the side effects are tremendous. I mean, some of these antidepressants have 73% sexual dysfunction. It's a big price tag. And they were never meant to be a decades long solution. So I
Right.
think people are fed up with this medical sedation model, and they want to get to the root of what's happening to them. How do they become a more fulfilled person, a more alive person? How do they remember who they are? And these psychedelics can get them there. What's beautiful right now is you can do it in the medical model. And yay, FDA, and yay, MAPS is doing all this work. They spent, I don't know, $140 million to re-legalize MDMA. It's a huge number to get a drug back to market. And yay, Johns Hopkins and Yale and University of California, San Francisco, all these different schools. And meanwhile, we also have the decrim nature movement out there, and they're going around city after city and saying no adult should tell another adult that they can't put nature in their body. And let's just decriminalize this. And it's not fair if the medical model, when it's not covered by insurance, are only for the affluent, then who can do this? You've got to decrim at the same time so people who can't afford that medical model can have access to the healing that this provides. And I think that's a really powerful service. And that message is not in conflict with the medical model. They need to be hand in hand. And then the third thing that's happening is this religious freedom. There are almost 200 or over 200 psychedelic churches in America right now. And they're saying we are a country founded on religious freedom. We have it protected at the federal level, and many of our states have those protections in their constitutions. Psychedelics have been used as a sacred medicine for thousands of years by every type of all of us, all of our ancestors. And we have the right to practice our religion peacefully in this country. And it's complicated because right now it's a DEA process, and there's questions. Well, they don't have the authority to determine whether a church is legal or non-legal, and it's the few churches, the two ayahuasca churches and the Native American church had to sue to get exemptions. But most of the other churches are saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to go through that process. We're going to practice peacefully and legally. And if you think we're doing something wrong, then come tell us. And I think that's beautiful work. And that's another way for people to access the medicine who don't want to have a diagnosis or don't need it to be therapy.
Mm-hmm. So I have two questions in mind. I'll start with the first, which is, we didn't actually talk about cannabis. Is cannabis considered a psychedelic? And if so, in what way is it like these others and also different, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, there's some groups that say put it into the same category, and there's others that say not. I think cannabis is tricky these days. I think what's tricky right now is the way cannabis is farmed. They are farming more and more for what's called increased THC and decreased CBD. And so in the old days, in the 60s and 70s, you had it really balanced, the THC and the CBD. And cannabis was a really peaceful drug. Now there are many strains, not all by any stretch, but there are many strains where the THC is so much higher than the CBD that we're seeing kids and people for the first time having psychotic breaks on cannabis. We're seeing violence with cannabis. Mm-hmm. And people don't understand enough about that there is a radical difference between one strain and another. So I think with all of these medicines, and we didn't do this disclaimer up front, but there's certainly different people who have different mental health backgrounds that make them not a good candidate for cannabis or any psychedelic. There are people who are taking different prescriptions that are contraindicated. There are people taking different supplements that are contraindicated. And these are things that people should be really thinking about. These are powerful, powerful medicines. And I just want to take one more place. You brought up alcohol. There's a study out of Imperial College, Dr. David Nutt, where he said, let's forget how drugs are classified. Let's just look at the harm to self and the harm to others and re-rank the drugs. On the far left of his chart is alcohol. It's a 73. For perspective, heroin is a 55. The far right-hand side are mushrooms. It's a 6. LSD is a 7. MDMA is a 9. So yes, you can overdose on Tylenol. You need to be careful with all of these. And relatively, these named psychedelics are not addictive and relatively reduced risk compared to other drugs that are perfectly legal, like tobacco and alcohol.
Yeah, and you could, even if heroin was non-addictive and you're like, yo, man, you gotta try heroin one time. I've never done heroin, but I don't imagine that a year later I would be like, oh, dude, my life totally pivoted in a really positive direction that one time I did heroin. Like, you're not getting that, but that you do get that. Like, so there's people, like you said, do a psychedelic one time, life goes in a different, often very wonderful direction. So, yeah, again, why I'm such a proponent I'm not a proponent that people should use it. I don't know enough about it. I'm a proponent that people should have the right, for sure.
And I talk, my book's called Psychedelics for Everyone. I don't mean everyone should take a psychedelic, but I do hope that people read this book and that they decide whether it's right for them, whether a psychedelic might be right for someone they love, or whether they just need to change the way they vote in the next election because they're more informed. There's 50 years of programming. It's a lot of programming. I mean, I grew up in the just say no era. I believe that my brain, the frying pan and the egg, and all bad things are going to happen. That's a lot to unwind. We have knee-jerk reactions to what the media fed us, what our teachers fed us, what our parents fed us. It's a lot to unpack, and we need to get information out there so people can make better decisions and talk openly about mental health and talk openly about drug use. And caffeine's a drug and alcohol is a drug, and all of these are drugs. So it's not that we're anti-drug, it's which drugs and how do we use them?
So if we go back to, you had, let's call it, and I don't want to put a label on it, but would you say that your foray into the world of psychedelics represented some sort of an awakening for you? Is that a reasonable term?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So in that space of that awakening, you clearly decided, hey, and again, I don't want to put words to it. So these are questions, right? But is it fair to say that you decide, hey, I want my professional life moving forward to have some sort of richer or additional meaning and purpose relative to, let's say, before I was an entrepreneur, but like it was not as maybe meaningful as where I want to take my life. Is that?
Yeah, you know what it was, Jeff? It's a mind. Here's the switch. The switch goes like this. In the way I was brought up, it was a scarcity-based culture. The messages from my parents were, you've got to work hard, you've got to protect your stuff, you've got to outrun the other guy. You have to really save and think, and there's just not enough for everyone. That's the culture that I think most of us grow up in. Psychedelics are like, no, I don't think that's true. I think there is plenty for everyone out there. There is beauty everywhere. We don't have to pay a subscription to have someone manufacture it on a TV when we really can take a more aware walk in nature and see all sorts of beauty. And I am okay, and I'm always going to be okay. It doesn't take that many calories just to keep alive. The shelter that I need is not that great. And I can live with or without what I have. That realization is a game changer in terms of how you pursue business. It changes all sorts of things. It changes the conversations you have. It changes why you're doing the work. Okay, right now I'm doing work because I'm gathering resources for my family. Right now I'm doing work because I want to have more of these discussions. I want to connect with people at a real level. I want to share what I'm learning, and I want to learn what you're learning. My healing is your healing is my healing, all of that kind of stuff. But it does take, again, the old entrepreneurs, you need to, until you sell enough, until you have FU money, you haven't made it. Well, I'm saying you kind of have FU money now. Most people, you have it. You just don't know you have it because we've been told we don't have enough. We are so worried about saving money for that potential you at 90 who needs to go into assisted living, whatever, that we don't live now when our bodies are most capable of living. And it's backwards. It doesn't work. It's that knowing that we're fine now.
So I'm curious. You have a lot of these conversations. I assume they don't all go as smoothly as this one. Like you do run into dogmatic opposition. Like, what's the steelman the opposition here? Like, what's the anti-narrative here? Because yeah, I guess I'll just start there. What
Yeah.
what do these people have to say against all this?
I think you have some anti-narrative. I think, again, the anti-narrative is based in scarcity. So some of that anti-narrative is, so, well, you don't understand. My fill in the blank got addicted to fill in the blank and is having an awful life. Okay, I hear that. I do. And these drugs are called drugs, and that's called drugs, and it's the same. No, I don't. I'm sorry that you're having this experience, and it sounds like a hard experience, but it's a different experience. What your person was doing was different. How they were doing it was different. What they were doing was different. It's just a different experience. So I hear people who are scared of addiction. I hear people who are scared.
Can I interject?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
like as an empirical fact, these are non-addictive substances, right?
The vast majority. We can say, hey, ketamine has shown addictive potential in animals and in recreational use. We can say MDMA has shown, again, some behavioral addiction. Cannabis has shown some behavioral addiction, but physiologically, these are non-addictive substances for the most part. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So it's just being misinformed. So that's on that side. On the spiritual side, there are people from the major religions who are like, well, this is cheating. You don't need to use a medicine to have a direct religious experience. And they're right. You don't need to do any of this. You can get to a non-ordinary state of consciousness through meditation. You can get there through breath work. You can get there through exercise. So let's take need out of the discussion. The question is, for many of us who feel abandoned from our churches, who are tired of the moral preaching, who haven't had a direct religious experience or want to deepen our religious experience, is this a viable route to go to get there? And I believe the answer is absolutely yes. And there's there's books out there, and almost you pick the religion, and there's that religion and psychedelics book out there. Again, this is with thousands and thousands of years of history. It's hard to argue that most of the world's religions, at least the core teaching of it, wasn't shaped in some part by something psychedelic. Then we get into what then happened when the scarcity mindset took over and rules started getting into place, and I need to protect my turf or protect my church or protect my whatever. But that's different than the core teachings of love your brother and sister. You don't need to have anything to get into the kingdom of heaven. You have it already. You are wise. You are loved. You are beautiful. All those core messages that, again, you feel them. Many people feel them with the help of a psychedelic. And let me just take one more thing and I'll stop. I don't believe psychedelics are cures for anything. It's not just a biochemical reaction. They are catalysts. They're catalysts for awakening, for awareness, whatever term you want to use. But then the hard work is following the psychedelic. Okay, I had this insight. Now, what do I do with it? How does it change the way I have conversations? How does it change the way I interact with my family? How does it change the way I interact with my enemies? How does it change the way I look at the world? And that is an ongoing process. So the moments of psychedelics are few and far between. The work is all that integration that happens after.
Hey there, real quick, I just wanted to let you know, I have been concentrating a lot lately on providing tons of value to my text message community. This could be random thoughts. This could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning or a special I'm running or a free training I'm hosting. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed. The number is 702-996-3926. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the podcast.
So you described two types of opposition. You have the one that's basically just misinformation. It's opposition on the basis of misinformation, right? They're looking at MDMA and they're looking at cocaine and thinking, heroin, well, they're both drugs, therefore they must both have these properties, when they just simply don't. So, I would say that is not legitimate opposition in the sense that it's not based on legitimate rationale. Maybe I need some psychedelics to not be so dogmatic and binary, but whatever. And then you have opposition that's based on, as you described it, kind of like a spiritual morality, like a morality.
You got to work hard. You're not working hard enough if you cheat and take a medicine.
Yeah. And so to me, the religious freedom argument invalidates an argument against psychedelics on the basis of religious or spiritual belief or conviction. Like, okay, great, that is great for you, but if you want to be free to have that belief, I should be free to have my belief about how I get my belief, right? Like, so again, I'm like, that one doesn't sound super legitimate to me either.
Go back to that first one for a second.
Okay.
It's super, like, what I get a lot. Okay, I'm sober. I'm in a period. I'm in a sobriety thing, a 12-step program for whatever, for alcohol, and should I take a psychedelic? Should, again, is the wrong word. Could. Why would you want to take a psychedelic? Well, I want to deepen my practice. Great. Then it sounds like you have your answer. What's wild though is there are people then who have alcohol dependencies, and for them it's like, well, isn't taking a drug to get off of the drug? How does that make sense? And what I'm telling you is, like, there's a reason why Bill W., who founded Alcoholics Anonymous, wanted LSD to be part of the protocol for Alcoholics Anonymous. Is because step number one is to give yourself over to a higher power. And for many of us, we don't have any modeling in our lives on how to do that. We have church, which is miserable, or synagogue, which was boring, and we don't have parents who are particularly religious. We don't have any models. So with a LSD, psilocybin, you pick your flavor, you can have that experience, which then makes it easier to move forward on a 12-step program, regardless of whether that's for alcohol or smoking or sex or whatever. And that's really interesting. But I can understand, I'm having this issue, and now I'm going to put another drug in my body. Yeah, once. You are. And it can make a big difference.
So, yeah, I mean, that's again, I mean, it's almost like all semantics, right? Well, it's just like, if you arbitrarily class this as a drug and this is not, and then say, like, all drugs are this, therefore don't use one of these to wean off another of these. I mean, like, you've just created that entire argument on the basis of the words you attach to things, right? So is there any legitimate, like, is there anything out there, any of these oppositional threads where you're like, okay, that one I really, really need to kind of work to overcome because they have a really good point, and therefore I should modify or be impacted by that point, to modify my point?
Yeah, I'll give.
Or is it all just like people that are confused, basically?
No, I think here's a good one. In the old days, thousands of years ago, there was just healer, and the healer was both the medical healer and the spiritual healer. As Western society has developed, we have really piecemealed those into two roles. Doctors are pure science, and priests are pure spirit. And psychedelics dances in both worlds. And I can understand the argument, well, if you give the drugs to the spiritual people, they don't have the knowledge, the latest knowledge of my brain and my body to keep me safe. I think that's a fair argument. And conversely, if you give the psychedelics to the medical people, you can say they don't have the knowledge of the spiritual world and how these drugs impact that to keep me safe. So I believe there's a reconciliation that is needed between these two worlds. I do think people operating psychedelic churches, creating ceremonies, need to, or would be well served to use medical best practices, to have a strong medical intake, to have medical professionals review those intakes, to have an informed consent process, to have strong preparation and integration practices, and they can learn from the medical community. And I think the medical community can look at the spiritual community and say, oh, wait a minute, you do this in groups versus individuals? Yeah. Why? Show me how you do that. And now all of a sudden, the medical professional's ability to earn more per hour has gone up. The medical professional's ability to charge less per patient has increased, which increases access. But to do all of this, we need to get this above the ground. We need the churches and the medical practices to be able to practice openly and to share information. So it's a good argument that shouldn't be in just the spirits, or it shouldn't be in just the doctors, but there's also a path forward with, let's bring it up above, not have it underground anymore.
Well, I actually really I agree that one feels like, again, one of the reasons it is reconcilable is because it is actually so grounded in reality that, like, okay, it's a real issue, therefore there's a real way forward, as opposed to it's a created issue, therefore we're not even like speaking the same language to try to solve it, right? So that one, I'm totally with you. And not, I would say that ties in with a very consistent theme in my life, which is that, is there sort of like a reductionist tendency in the educational system, in the educational process. Again, as we move in the era of specialization, like you said, there's sort of a fragmentation of truth, which is how you end up with universities producing so much insanity in so many areas in a lot of ways. But I mean, witness that, again, not only doctors are not versed in psychedelics, they're also not versed in the food we eat. Like, come on.
It becomes a pretty big unraveling because we treat doctors like the high priests of our society. We are taught very early to hand over our agency. You have a MD behind your name or PhD, you are all knowing. And I think it's a surprise to a lot of people. It's like, oh, wait, they only know a lot about a little area. And and they don't know me. And
And they have a chart on their wall that tells me I should eat bread and cereal 11 times a day. Like, come on. Okay. So anyway, but I actually love that. Is that notion getting any traction? Are there any medical schools that are, you mentioned Johns Hopkins, that's a huge medical school. Like, are they starting to teach this stuff?
Yeah. Johns Hopkins, I think, is really doing a nice job at looking at the mystical experience and trying to see, to recognize and quantify the fact that people are having these transformational experiences, and then also looking at what are the best practices to deliver them, not being so clinical, being more comfortable. How do we do this? I think we're seeing, there's two different associations now with the psychedelic churches, and they're both trying to get their members to adopt best practices and see what's happening on the medical side. And then I do think we're seeing more and more conversations between the groups. And there's a psychedelic science conference in Denver in June. 13,000 people were there. And there's an academic track and a business track and a spiritual track. And all those people mixed and mingled. So I think there's traction all over. I think we're seeing people operating better, and we're seeing less of this is the funny part, I think, for the consumer. And I'll use legal ketamine as the example. You can go to a ketamine clinic near you, and they're going to hook you up to an IV and take your vitals and give you ketamine and send you on your way. And they're going to charge you, I don't know, $600, $1,000. And you can go to a different ketamine clinic, and they're going to do preparation and intention setting and put you into a living room with a weighted blanket and give you that medicine. And then they're going to work with you afterwards and unpacking what's happened to you. Probably $600 to $1,000. People don't know what to ask for. And there's different philosophies of the one group believes it's purely biochemical. And the other group saying, no, it's biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual, it's all of it. So consumers have to educate themselves, whether they're thinking about this in the medical path or the underground path or the psychedelic tourism path. They've got to ask the questions. What do you know? What is your experience? What is your philosophy? How are you going to take care of me? What are you going to do before? What are you going to do after? And then make the decision that's right for them.
So, obviously, is it fair to say at this point, at least professionally, you've devoted your energy to this particular cause? Absolutely. Like, you're not writing like 7 other books on 7 other things.
No, this is all I'm focused on these days is how do I help people experience this in as safe a container as possible.
And you've chosen that. Why? In your words?
Because I want it for me. I want to be able to go to ceremonies. I want to connect with other people. I want to have this direct religious experience from time to time. And I think it is everybody's right to be able to have this experience. And if I think I'm a unique bridge. I think I'm in such an incredibly privileged place of existence that I can spend this much time thinking about it, and I can synthesize these different learnings and try to put them into the safest container that I can think of, but then also, help people find the container to do their own work. I don't do any of the work for anybody. I can just help them find the container where they can do their work.
Is it fair to say you feel like of all the causes you could devote yourself to, this one has as much potential to positively impact the world en masse as anything you could work on?
This totally goes back to how we started this conversation. What else do you know that you can say, what's the most significant thing that's happened in your life? I took a little bit of this I took a little bit of this molecule and it changed my life. That's incredible. And how do you help people to find the ability to do that as reduced risk as possible? Seems like a very worthy thing to spend energy on.
And what's your vision? I'm curious, and it may, whether it's in your lifetime or not, when this becomes, and it feels like it's actually a reversion back to a place of acceptance, a la 2000 years ago, where this is commonplace, it's widespread, it's part of, the physical and the spiritual modalities for growth. Like, what do you see being different in the world if and when we reach that point?
I think we as a species need to decide if we're going to continue on, and that we are and see us connected to these things that we're destroying in the earth and to each other, and to recognize that while I might not pull the trigger, this is a violent society in which I'm paying taxes to and contributing to. Our kids are dealing with shooting drills in schools. We know we have nuclear weapons pointed at us. Of course, we have this culture where you need to work more and more. You can never unplug. You can never get away from the email, the social media. I think if we don't start looking internally to find solutions, and I'll tell you one more thing, just I have 2 kids. So much of what I'm hearing today in our culture is about looking outward. You need to keep me safe. You need to address me differently. You need to do this, that, or the other thing so I'm not triggered. And I understand where that's coming from, and I appreciate it. And I'm very concerned on that. It's like saying, I don't feel well, so I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to get a prescription for you. The arrow's in the wrong direction. We need to start changing and talking about, how do I perceive what's being said to me? How do I respond to this? How do I know who I am? And it's a different way of looking. And I believe that psychedelics are a tool that's going to be instrumental in changing the way we look at ourselves. And once we start looking at ourselves differently, that's going to change the way we look at others and the way we look at nature. So I see nothing but beauty ahead, because I do believe these things are going to happen.
I have this vision that I've only shared it with my wife, and I'm trying to think if I've actually shared it with anybody else, but this seems apropos. There's all this, the war in Ukraine stuff. I'm like thinking to myself, is there any way the CIA could just go get a big dose of psychedelics into Putin? Like, I don't think he'd want to, I envision, I'm curious, like, that sounds silly, but like, it's almost like I picture him being like, what am I fighting for? I just want to, I hug Ukraine.
I hug everybody. I'm Big Bear. Yes. Yes. I love that.
But is that, metaphorically the type of transformation you see possible in this world with this medicine?
Of course. Of course. And we can look at a Putin, we can look at a Trump, we can look at a Biden, but we can look at all of us who are kind of overachievers. And where did that come from? Where did that drive come from? For a lot of us, it's because I'll speak of me. I wanted affection from my parents. I wanted to make sure they loved me. And I was afraid that if I don't perform, my love from them is at risk. When we take that fear away from how we operate, you can still get a lot of things done and do beautiful work, but it changes kind of how you do it. It changes the stress that goes along with it. It changes the way it feels. And yeah, I'd love to, and world leaders are no different than CEOs, and we all have our stuff and our childhood things that we're carrying forward that these medicines can help unpack. And for many of us, the last thing I'll say on this is we feel we're fine. I don't need a therapist. I'm fine. Look at how good I am. Look at how much money I made. Look at how big my company is. Look at how big my congressional district is. But at some level, we know that's not true. And this is a way to approach that reality that where people might not be willing to do 10 years of therapy. But yeah, I might do a day and try this thing and see what happens.
Yeah, man, I'm thinking about, you're so right in the way is in my platform, Entra, we have these events, and my wife and I hosted an event, and then there's these other events, and there's all these people coming in, and you can just feel that people's barometer for okayness is their relative level of financial security. Like, I mean, full stop for most people.
Yeah.
And it is, what that means is that in a let's say inflation, what that means is that you give to macroeconomic forces the ability to make you systematically less and less okay over time based on the change of buying power of a currency. That's sad. We're all getting less okay over time because of inflation, because we've attached our okayness to the buying power of our net worth.
And what does that mean to use to reference Thomas Paine's agrarian justice? What does it mean for this next generation coming up when everything of value is spoken for? When they look at these houses that they can say, oh, it was only $200,000 a few years ago, now it's $1 million. How am I ever going to be able to afford that? I can't play in this game. These games don't, this whole game doesn't work. I need a new game. I need a tiny home. I need a different community. I need a van life. I need something else. And I'm on all these different drugs because my parents were trying to do the best that they knew how to do to normalize me and make sure I would be as productive in school as possible. But now I have these other drugs that don't play well with other things. And how do I deal with that? And it's a lot to unpack, and it's all possible, but it takes work at the individual level to get there.
When you were talking about this external orientation, I was thinking of something my wife and I's therapist always tells us: dependency breeds hostility, right? Like, one of the reasons I think that external orientation of, I need the government, I need the community, I need the church, I need the parents, I need the school, the job, the whatever to make me okay or to make me feel better, is actually the essence of why there's so much anger boiling in society right now.
Because we gave up our control. It's awful. So all of a sudden I'm the victim and I have no control over my happiness, over my belief in myself, because I'm waiting for someone else to tell me it's okay. Now you have enough. Now you are loved. And it never happens. The goalpost keeps moving. I'm strongly suggesting we take that back. I'm in charge of everything in my existence, period. I'm responsible for 100% for everything. And because of that, I am responsible. I know I'm responsible for my happiness, and I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to be well, and I'm going to treat myself with the love that I deserve. And I'm not going to wait for you or my partner or my boss or my parents to give me some version of love that I think I need. I'm going to do it for myself.
That feels like a moment right there. Matt, this has been exactly the conversation I was hoping for. It's like very informed, very erudite, very rational, but also very inspiring, and also very inspiring. Those are not contradictory forces. Thank you so much for being a guest here. Can you please share with the audience, obviously you have your book, Psychedelics for Everyone, anything else you have to offer you'd like to invite the audience into?
Yeah, my site is mattzemon.com. I have a free guide to microdosing for people who are looking to kind of tiptoe their way into this. There's also a way to get in touch with me, and I do kind of discovery calls with people who are interested in what psychedelics might mean for them, and just different ways to think about access through medical, decrim, religious. So I'm happy for people to go onto my site, go fill out the form, and I'll respond, and we'll set up a free call, and we'll talk, and that's it. I've got really nothing to sell other than that information, and that I'm happy to give. So, and then I have my books, Psychedelics for Everyone, that's on Audible and everywhere books are sold. And then I have a preparation integration journal that's also out there for people who are doing the path and want to have some prompts and things to help them before and after their psychedelic journeys.
So cool. Amazing work. Thanks for what you're doing in the world.
Jeff, thank you. I appreciate it. You certainly are reaching a lot of people with your school, and I think all of us entrepreneurs out there are grateful for what you're doing, trying to help us unlock our true potential.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And of course, to all the viewers and listeners out there, you are the best part of the show. You're why I do what I do every single day. So glad we got to spend this time together. Until next time.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
Pleasure and pain work like opposite sides of a balance. When we experience pleasure, the way that our brains get us back to the level position is first by tipping to the side of pain. As we become addicted, we are compulsively pursuing our drug in the total absence of joy.